As international concern for the state of the environment increases, the world's major polluters have done their best to greenwash their public images. In order to maintain their independence, some environmental charities such as Greenpeace refuse to take money from companies. Other charities are less squeamish. Conservation International is one of the biggest environmental charities in the US. They have a long list of celebrity supporters, including Harrison Ford and the Dixie Chicks. They also have another set of supporters, some of the biggest corporations in the world, including Rio Tinto, BP, Shell, BG Group, who also happen to be some of the world's biggest polluters. Conservation International staff earn $55 million a year in salaries and fringe benefits, which represents about 47% of consolidated total income. Add the $12.3 million they spend on travel, meetings and events, and that's nearly 60% of income. Whistleblowers who have worked at CI have accused its chief executives of securing those salaries by cozying up to major corporations, while failing to hold those businesses to account for polluting behaviour. This is evidenced in the official press release section of their website, which is mostly filled with rosy press releases praising the conservation efforts of their various patrons. This is in stark contrast to CI's utter silence with regard to the many environmental crimes of their corporate patrons. For example, Total's tar sands extraction in Madagascar, or BP's in Canada, which has been described by Greenpeace as the greatest environmental crime in history. So how does the relationship between Conservation International and these corporations work? Are they any more than a green PR company, helping major corporations launder their public images? We decided to find out. To do this, we pretended to be the biggest multinational arms company in the world, Lockheed Martin. We started by buying the domain name lockheed-martin.co.uk. Then we set up a replica site, but re-edited the text slightly. Our About Us page, for example, read,
Lockheed Martin has made great progress in its plans to inundate the UK with defence, or rather attack equipment and machinery so it can carry on pretending to be an imperial power and forget about the fact that it's completely broke.
Lockheed sells $30 billion a year of stuff to kill people with, including missiles, fighter jets and some alleged depleted uranium bombs. Their hardware is being used in most of the UN-recognised wars currently raging across the planet. They lobbied heavily in favour of the invasion of Iraq, a war which they subsequently made billions from through the sale of their hardware, such as this Hellfire missile, which was filmed exploding into a house containing 3 families in a famous collateral damage incident documented widely across television networks and newspapers all around the world as we were approaching Conservation International.
Nice missile. Did it look good? Sweet.
We contacted CI as Lockheed Martin, being very clear from the outset that it was PR and branding we were really interested in rather than conservation issues. Later, we dressed as a couple of arms industry scumbags and went to meet a senior figure from Conservation International's corporate relations department. We made our motivations very clear.
It is very nice to be talking to an organisation that understands business.
I've got a business background as well.
You do?
Well, before I've done 10 years doing corporate engagement work.
Yeah.
Before that, I had nearly 8 years doing marketing. So.
Because I'm sure you can understand, given the current trends that we're looking at in terms of kind of the way that, essentially, manufacturing everything from arms to everything else is perceived. We're trying to look at how a partnership, how working with you could facilitate an opportunity for us to modernise the image that has.
So what kind of conservation project would a company like Lockheed Martin wish to invest in? We told CI that we wanted to find an endangered species mascot that we could use as a kind of emblem for our company.
We are still keen on the endangered species issue. We feel that investment in large-scale projects such as forestry protection or internal reduction of energy consumption are rather impersonal and don't have the kind of resonance with the public that sponsorship of a particular species would. The idea would be to adopt a particular species as a sort of mascot and invest in the protection of that animal wherever it was threatened across the world. Perhaps you could send us a list of possible species to choose from. After internal discussion, we've decided that the Middle East would be our specific area of geographical interest.
Later, when we met Conservation International's Director of Corporate Relations, she told us she'd been doing some research on our behalf.
I wanted to explore this interest in species and interest in the Middle East internally.
Yeah.
So you could imagine, for example, supporting a small grants program targeted at conserving birds of prey or vulture conservation
I don't know about vulture, it's got a slightly negative.
Yeah, I think the motif of the vulture might be a little bit.
I'm sure they're endangered, but they're not the prettiest animals. Birds of prey, perhaps.
So birds of prey, they're very elegant, they're very well loved. Yeah, it's nice.
I would.
With aviation as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a good one.
We'd agree the target audience, we'd agree the key messages, we'd agree all
And that's something that you're quite...
So it's something we do with you in partnership, and we'd all discuss.
Right, okay, that's
and
interesting.
just so you know,
does that come with an extra, cost to the business, or is that something that you just sort of throw in, as it were?
No, it will be costed out in the proposal that we put.
So it's a service that you're providing. Would you even be looking at, that doesn't go as far as to sort of like look at how you incorporate the logo, the branding, and the message of the actual species, and
all that will be discussed.
to an extent, what we're looking at is the fact that some of our hardware is used in places where
It was a collateral damage film that was leaked to the press, specifically Channel 4 and Dispatches, and was broadcast at prime time on a Monday night, and was featured for 2 weeks in all the major broadsheets.
So
to give you some perspective,
that's been a bit of a headache. You can imagine. What I think Alex is trying to communicate is, how involved would you be in looking at this and saying, well, look, if for instance we were, looking at, potentially an emblem, a motif of this bird of prey, how involved would you be in helping us, dampen or on some level sort of satisfy the needs that Highbury Media has in terms of...
As I said, within the context of the partnership, we would be working as a team.
Conservation International invited us, Lockheed Martin, to become part of their Business Sustainability Council, where business leaders from some of the world's most polluting companies get together to discuss their various conservation-related activity, as well as strategic investments in conservation and dynamic communications and marketing campaigns that engage consumers and employees.
The BSC, the Business Sustainability Council,
which is great as well.
That is, just so you've got the info, that's $37,500 per year. You've seen the list of members. Shell, Disney, JP Morgan, there's lots of big companies that you know well, and so you have the networking happens. We'll get to meet all those people. Get involved in BSC there, so you're showing leadership by getting involved in that particular forum, engaging. So you'll see your name go on the list as a partner, so anybody can go and see that you're actually participating actively.
On the corporate sponsors section of their website, Conservation International state, "We believe that corporations are a major ally in our conservation efforts. It's like adding a big hitter to your championship team." It seems funny that CI would consider Lockheed Martin a major ally in their conservation efforts when we were explicit in our email correspondence that one of the key aspects of our conservation strategy was to recycle weapons for reuse again as more weapons.
We salvage as much munitions, detritus and shrapnel as possible, even from hostile environments, for recycling and eventual reuse in new systems. We have applied this methodology to systems ranging from large bombs and missiles to small arms ammunition.
We asked CI if they could come and help us make our business practices more environmentally friendly. Do you do environmental impact surveys on the operations of specific companies? I suppose is what I'm asking.
No, it doesn't do that.
I believe we've got recycling in the Human Resources Department now. I mean, is that something you could come in and look at our office activities and see if they were, how we were doing?
I'm not aware that we do that.
Also recycling of munitions recycling, which is obviously an issue for us as well.
Okay.
Instead, they were keen for us to offset our massive environmental impact by buying a forest in somewhere like Madagascar, while making a tidy profit in the process.
Maybe look at the carbon and climate offset strategy could be interesting. We have places like Madagascar and various locations in Asia and in Africa that would marry both a business interest and as well as a specific interest from our side on the climate leadership area.
Lockheed Martin is a huge company that emits many millions of tonnes of carbon into the atmosphere each year in its efforts to build, among other horrors, their not particularly green ballistic nuclear missiles, lots of distinctly unenvironmental cluster bombs, and the not particularly pleasant thermobaric weapons which suck the air out of victims, shred their internal organs and crush their bodies. Why would a green charity be encouraging large polluters to make more profits offsetting their environmental impact without even pressuring that company to reduce that damaging impact in the first instance? The only environmental assessment resource we could sign up for was the Integrated Biodiversity Assessment Tool, or IBAT, which is a database which allows businesses, mainly from the extractive industry, to find information on how their various mining or drilling projects might affect local wildlife. We asked for reassurance that IBAT wasn't a prescriptive, binding form of regulation.
So IBAT is a tool, just in the email there was a mention, is this something that we'd be regulated to do?
Yeah.
Exactly the
Is it
wording.
prescriptive?
Is it a prescriptive? No, that's not how it works. It's a tool.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's a database with all these different databases, the IUCN Red List, which is on species, the World UNEP, UN Environmental Agency.
Although the IUCN Red List and information on threatened species from the United Nations Environment Programme are both provided completely free, Conservation International charged $25,000 for access to the IBAT system. And for an extra $100,000 a year, companies can become consultative group members, which allows them to be involved in the strategic development and review of the IBAT programme.
There's also an opportunity, because the subscription is usually $25,000 a year, and we usually encourage people to take it up for more than once. Having said that, there's also an opportunity to have a more active involvement on the corporate
Consultative group member.
So there's different
That's what you were mentioning
there's different
before.
levels of potential involvement,
And what's what would the difference be between?
You'd be able to potentially, with the others involved in the group, be able to craft potentially what other data that may be incorporated in the future.
VP is one of the consultative group members of the IBAT system, and according to CI, it played a key role in the development of the resource. Strange then that in its emergency response plan for oil spills in the Gulf of Mexico, BP made assurances that it knew how to save seals, otters and walruses in the Gulf waters. But no such animals exist in the Gulf. Perhaps that's what happens when you let one of the world's biggest polluters write its own conservation guidance. We were starting to see how the cosy relationship between Conservation International and big business worked. CI's dependence on corporate funding made them unwilling to exert any pressure on polluters to change their ways. The main goal of a charity should be to make itself unnecessary. Helping big polluters spend their already insufficient corporate social responsibility budgets while failing to hold those corporations to account for polluting behaviour is not a long-term solution to the many environmental crises that we face.